Hey guys, welcome back to the Disciplined HQ podcast. I'm here with Josh Kachadorian. Josh, how are you?
I'm doing great, Corey. Great to be here, man. Excited for this.
Man, me too. You're a guy that I followed for quite a while. We got connected whenever Disciplined Apparel first jumped off, and I've gotten to hear a bit of your story, and I'm super excited for everybody else to get a little window into all of the stuff that God has led you through. So, can you give us just your life story as far as professionalism and your faith and fitness journey?
Yeah, and first I want to give you a shout out. Disciplined Apparel is amazing. I love your stuff. It's done so well. Every time I wear it, I get compliments. So guys, if you're listening, go out and get some because Corey, you do an amazing job with what you do. And yeah, I'd love to tell you guys a little bit about who I am and what I've done. Some people listening, and maybe you know this about me, is that I wrote this book called The Standard: Discovering Jesus as the Standard for Masculinity. I also just released another book, but I want to talk about the backstory of what got me to where I am now. And so I started off in a Christian home. So I was really fortunate to have a mom and dad that served the Lord and grow up with a praying mama that had the right, I was in the right environment, Corey. So thankfully, I never really strayed too far. You know, we have our things we do as kids, but thankfully, I really served the Lord through most of my life. And I got really serious when I was going into college. And I'll just speed this story up and let you guys know that I actually started my first business out of school as an entrepreneur in the fitness equipment space. So I sold fitness equipment and supplements, and this would be not a gym, but it would be if you wanted to put a home gym in your house, or if you owned a hotel or a fire department, or you know, if you're working at one of those vertical markets. We also outfitted, you know, those types of places as well as gyms, but mostly residential. And I grew that business from one location to three locations, and then somewhere along the way I realized that this was like pre-social media and pre everything blowing up about entrepreneurship all over the internet. And you know, it's a retail location. I had two business partners, and I was now doing this for 5 years. And the last year of that business, I was married, and I was thinking to myself, like, I'm working a lot in the business. I wasn't working on it. Retail locations can be really tough. And I felt like, because of the seasonality of the business, because of the business arrangement and my business partners, that I needed to get to the next level. And I was kind of ready to graduate. I was ready for, and I was praying this too, like, Lord, we're ready. My wife and I were ready for what's next. And we just had this anticipation and excitement about what our future held. And we felt it was going to be a new chapter. And the Lord came through. He opened up a door in a corporate environment, which led to a move. So we actually moved from upstate New York, where we were from. We moved down to New York City, which was a big move. And I started off as a sales representative in a pharmaceutical company. And to fast forward that story, I've been there for almost 20 years in six different leadership positions, just having incredible promotion and learning a lot and getting a lot of experiences in terms of becoming the best sales representative I could be, but then also learning training, sales training, coaching, leadership and development, building my own high performing teams, and then helping others build theirs, and just doing a lot of different things over the span of six positions in 20 years in what is now a Fortune 100 company. And it was during that time, the last couple of years, is where we get this itch for, hey, God, what are you really calling me to do? Like, I love what I do. I'm very thankful. I'm very blessed. But I felt the deeper calling of there's other things that God had for me. And that's when I started journaling one day. And that turned into a book called The Standard, and then that turned into a group that I run called the Standard 59 Mastermind and standard59.com, and now we're serving men, and that's my side passion project. But it's more than a passion project. I'll call it my mission, because as men, we all have a ministry. And I just want to say, as I walk through that story, some people are listening to this, and you might be thinking, well, you know, I don't do anything like that, or this is the only thing I do right now. And the one thing that I had to focus on, Corey, throughout everything I was doing, and I learned this the hard way throughout my years in business, is that I'm not defined by what I do. If it was a good day, if it was a job that I loved, if it was a job that I didn't love and it was a tough day, I just remembered this is not my identity. And as men, we find so much identity in what we do, what our occupation is. You know, what's the first thing you do when you meet someone? Hey, what do you do for a living? and then they
Hmm.
respond, and then we start measuring each other, and we really find our identity as men from our work. So my encouragement and what I've learned in my self journey is that I'm not identified by my job or my career or what I'm building in business. I'm really identified first as a son of God, and then there's something in there that I have a mission to accomplish.
Yeah. And I love that story. So if we could, from the beginning, where in the faith were you? So like Baptist, Catholic, what is it?
Yeah, so I was brought up in more of a charismatic environment. So my upbringing was more, I guess you could say, Pentecostal roots slash non-denominational. So that would
Nice.
be my upbringing. Yep.
How did you enjoy that? Like, have you stayed in sort of the charismatic church, or have you gone to different denominations?
Yeah, it's when we talk about the streams of Christianity, number one, I'll say that I can swim in a lot of different streams. I listen to a lot of different
Hmm.
things. I read a lot of different things. In fact, my newest book, Kingdom Driven, I'm quoting, I guess what you would call Baptist. I'm quoting some different old timers that I feast on the most: T. Austin Sparks, F.B. Meyer, Love Tozer. So there's a lot of
Hmm.
influences in my life. In terms of my charismatic roots, and charismatic is even it's kind of a newer term, right? There's
Yeah.
Pentecostalism, and then charismatic is a wide range, right? So there's a huge
Yeah.
spectrum within that. And I probably have fallen, I've probably been in all parts of that spectrum, and I've landed on being a little bit more conservative in my beliefs. But I believe God speaks, I believe God heals, I believe the gifts are for today. I
Hmm.
believe God wants to partner with us. And I believe that we can live a lifestyle where we're operating with God. And there are some supernatural elements to that I don't deny. And it's also not my only central focus. So I think sometimes things can get outweighed. So it depends what part of the
Yeah.
stream you're in. But my focus, if I could just cap off this, and you're welcome to ask me anything you want. My central focus is conformity to Christ. One of
Hmm.
my favorite quotes by T. Austin Sparks, who's my hero, is that God is more concerned about conformity to his son than anything else. So what we
Hmm.
see in Christianity is that there's all these streams, and they all major in different things. One stream may have a focus on signs and wonders. One stream may have a focus on evangelism. One stream may be focusing on feeding the poor and doing good works and kind of social justice type activities. Those are all like spokes on a wheel. I'm more interested in what's the hub and what's known as the eternal purpose. What's his plan and purpose for us, for his church, for the kingdom, and then
Yeah.
how do we fit into that and how do we express it?
I love it. And the only reason I ask is because I grew up Episcopal, went to Catholic school whenever I was younger, went to a or going to a Baptist church now, and work at a Methodist church. And
Okay.
so I've really enjoyed just seeing that, like you said, the spectrum of like these different streams of how Christians flow together. And I appreciate people who are able to go to different denominations and, you know, understand that we aren't tied to one of these things. And there is good in each one of these things. And there is, potential harm in these things. The Methodist Church is uh, pretty rigid in structure, but there are people who find that structure very helpful. Same thing with the Episcopal Church, and I learned a lot about the Methodist and Episcopal Church. Going there just like as far as like how they're related, and then the Baptist Church, they can definitely be different. Like that's good. I think Baptist is probably where I find myself aligning most of the time. But I remember leaving. I grew up in Texas in an Episcopal church, and the whenever I told the people at my church that I was leaving, and this was a church of like 30 people,
Hmm.
tiny town in Texas, and I told them that I was going to be going to a Baptist church whenever I moved to Louisiana, and they were like, "Are you sure you want to do that? Because they do not allow dancing." And I was like, "Wait, is that actually a thing?" They're like, "Yeah, they don't allow dancing." And so like that was one of the first questions I had whenever I got to this church. I was like, "Hey, so can we dance here?" And they're like, "No."
Yeah.
It's just
Interesting.
it is so funny. But again, like the gospel was preached, and I don't agree with the thought of you aren't allowed to dance in the Baptist church. It's a very strange thing, just like there are very strange things in like the Methodist church or strange things in the Episcopal church. But yeah, so I love that exposure to different denominations of Christianity because you get to see who the leaders of that denomination are and the thought process there. So, like John
Yeah.
Wesley is a leader in the Methodist Church, and what is it? Calvin is the leader in the Baptist Church. Episcopals, I'm not really sure, but
Yeah, I think there's a couple. It probably depends, and there's different streams and spectrums within everyone. So even in Christianity, when we talk about a specific stream, until we really talk to each other and really chop it up, it's hard to find out like exactly where you're from. So, you know, what I focus on is, what's unique about us as brothers is that we major in the majors, right? Not the minors. So I can totally walk with you. And if we agree on the basics of the gospel and the uncompromising truth of who Jesus Christ is, his supremacy, his centrality, his lordship, that he came in the flesh, that he died, that he resurrected on the third day, then we can walk together. And, we might find out that, hey, on this doctrine, or what do you think about this? And we could have a different opinion, but I think that's healthy if we can walk and we can talk it out. Because here's the truth. Within every denomination, not everybody agrees. Right. So if I had to go in and say, hey, before I go to any church or before we fellowship, and I had to say, hey, I need to know where you stand on these 10 peripheral issues, we probably would have a really hard time finding people that we could walk with 100%. So I think the beauty of it is, can we love each other as brothers? Can we listen to each other's ideas? Can we sharpen each other through those ideas? One other thing I want to say in this conversation, because a lot of times if you grew up, you're the product of your upbringing, or you're the product of your environment when you got saved, where you went to church, where you plugged in. And I think the Lord will sometimes put you in a specific stream or open you up for a season. So sometimes you're there for a season because every one of those streams has something. And if we even look over history, the Lord was usually restoring something through each one of those ministers, and then something came back into the church because of that. I live in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. Down the street from me is George Whitfield's house. So when he came from the UK, he established Nazareth. He established this area, and then he sold it to the Moravians. So there's different elements that these men throughout revival history brought in, and then they camped around a truth that they had, and then it turned into a denomination. And then we got to be careful that that denomination doesn't get old and crusty and just camp out on one truth and never move into the next thing, right? So it's important to drink from a couple different places, and sometimes the Lord will put you in a place or have you listen to a certain teacher or a certain stream because you need some of the revelation that they have, and it might be something that you don't have. Because here's my end statement on this is we're a body, right? The church is a body of believers. We're a multi-membered body. So to think that only one specific group has everything, it doesn't really make sense. Some are the hands, some are the feet, others are arms. So we all fit in together to complete this picture of what we're all called to do together.
yes, I love that. And so, one of the other things that's really impressive about your life is that you made that jump from entrepreneurship into a corporate structure. Because most people, when they think entrepreneurship, especially now, like you said, entrepreneurship has become kind of a trendy thing, and the thought is, I'm going to be my own boss for the rest of my life because I can control, or I can be in control of my schedule and all the rest. And I think the best meme I've ever seen about this is, I decided, or I didn't want someone controlling my schedule, so I started my own business, and now I work all the time. So-
That's great.
and it's just like that. But that the ability to, what was that transition like to go from entrepreneurship into a corporate structure? Like, was that hard for you to get over, like, personal identity wise, or was it a smooth transition?
Yeah, great question. It was an exciting transition. So a couple things, like, as we've built, so any guys that are following like all the major entrepreneur influencers, like there's this dream out there that if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm going to live the dream. I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to have the swag and all the stuff that I might be pursuing in life or that I'm elevating. Because if we look at the shiny boxes, like on Instagram, right, it's all about this status that everyone's chasing, right? This title and all the stuff that comes with it. And we're also in the age of an online entrepreneur, which you do with e-commerce. And, we have a lot of experience over here in my house with my wife and myself. And when I was doing it, it was retail. It wasn't like this glamorous thing. It was sitting in and one of my stores was in a mall, and I'd be there till 9:30 at night. And it was long hours, and it was customer service. It was doing all the stuff. But the first thing that I've learned is whatever season you're in life, I learned a lot in that season. So I was looking at it like training. When I first took the job, not the job, when I first started the company, I partnered with a family member who was already really successful. So I was like, oh, this is going to be inevitable. This is going to be living the dream. And we had to build it up, and it wasn't exactly what I thought. And I had to put in a lot of man hours, a lot of work, and I learned a lot. And I maximized that time along the way to say, hey, this is like business school. This is school. And then eventually, when I knew it was time, and I was, married at the time, and I was looking for the next chapter in life, and some different circumstances which pushed us into this next opportunity, which really was the Lord opening a door. It wasn't hard. It came with a lot of excitement for me because I was newly married. We were moving, and the type of position I took was a sales representative position in New York City. And it basically was like entrepreneurship, only they're going to give me a company car. They're going to give me a budget that I can use. They're going to say, hey, here's all your customers, and then go figure it out and come back and make sure that you meet your goals and exceed your goals. So I came into that corporate environment with the mindset of an entrepreneur, and I ran my sales territory like its own business. And that led to my success. So what we find is in the corporate environment, any environment, people go stale, people go lame, and you find people just kind of check in and do the minimum, like gravity in life, right? After a while, same thing going to the gym. You can just go there, and you know someone right now that's been in the gym the whole time you've been there, and their body never changes. They're just kind of going in and checking boxes. And that's not what I did when I came into the corporate environment. I worked it like an entrepreneur. I said, this is such an incredible opportunity. And that work ethic, the right behaviors, the right performance that followed led to my promotion.
Yeah. And so, what were those things from entrepreneurship that were most helpful in the corporate environment? Like, what were the things that you had to experience and grow through as an entrepreneur that translated the most to sales in the corporate environment?
Yeah, well, since this is the Discipline HQ podcast, let's first talk about fitness, right? Because I can't tell this journey without sharing like how fitness has been a part of my life. So I'm going to start with that foundation first, because I was always into working out and developing the discipline and the structure of just learning how to show up and do something, whether you feel like it and even when you don't feel like it, when you're seeing results and when you're not seeing results, when you want to stay in bed and you still roll out and you got to get to the gym and do what you're supposed to do. So those elements, and this is why it's so important what you're doing here, Corey, is highlighting the disciplined lifestyle with your apparel, with the show, with what you're about, is because that's the backbone and that's the structure for any kind of success in life, having that structure. So building that structure and then taking that into entrepreneurship to make sure you're on time, to make sure you have great customer service, to see the business, so specifically on your question, see everything with a macro lens, like understanding my profit margins, understanding inventory and what I had, and if someone wanted something, and if I didn't have it, and how would I get it, and just managing my books, and then taking that approach over into corporate to say, I'm not an employee. I'm not going to look at myself that way. I'm going to look at myself as a manager. I'm going to look at myself as an entrepreneur. I'm going to bring this entrepreneurial mindset, which I think is a biblical mindset. So let's introduce the word here, stewardship, right? So I'm stewarding my body and fitness. I'm stewarding my business when I was an entrepreneur. And now I'm stewarding another man's business in the corporate environment, but I'm stewarding it as if it's my own. And we operate as believers with this principle of stewardship, which is everything we're managing doesn't really belong to us, but we're called to be good stewards of it. And my definition of stewardship is to manage and multiply. We see this in the parable of the talents. The landowner says, okay, here's the talents that I'm giving you. And he expects not just give it back to me when I come back, he expects a return on investment. So there's
Hmm.
management, but there's also multiplication. So then how do I
Yeah.
manage and multiply? And that's the mindset that I take into everything I do now.
Yeah. And so how this is I feel like a question that a lot of Christians struggle with whenever it comes to this disciplined life, but also reaching those levels of success. Because I feel like as Christians, there's a juxtaposition of the humility that we're called to embrace, but also the benefits that come with being good at your job, namely getting paid a high salary. And so, how is it? Was it ever hard for you to reconcile those things as a believer? Like reconcile success with your faith?
Yeah. So this is a really important issue, and this is something that's very dear to my heart. And it's the type of men that I speak to, and the guys that I work with. It's a huge theme within the new book, Kingdom Driven. So I wrote
Mm,
this specifically for guys that identify as driven. So let's break this down. So first of all, as men, we're wired for excellence, right? We have this dominion
yeah.
mandate that God gives Adam in the garden, which goes into our DNA. So
Hmm.
it's the reason why we pursue greatness. It's the reason why you want a better life. You want something. You want a legacy. You want to leave your mark. And when it's aligned with God, which is what we need to talk about, it can be beautiful. It can express your God given design, and you can really use it to build and expand the kingdom. And I'm okay with you getting blessed in the process. God loves to bless his children. So I'm not an anti-prosperity guy. Prosperity is part of the package, and we need to define what that looks like. But on the flip side, when this ambition is not aligned, that's when this dominion that God gave us turns into domination. So this is when men build companies and then they ruin them. It's when men, like, why do guys climb mountains? Why do they run races? Why do they want to leave their mark? That's an expression of something God placed in them. So number one, we need to recognize that the ambition that you have within yourself is not evil. It's not bad. It's in your DNA because God made you and designed you for greatness. Now, the next thing is we come into Christianity and we feel and we're told, like, hey, die to yourself, which I wholeheartedly endorse the message of the
Yeah.
cross. And we give all these mixed messages. We presented a feminized Jesus, right? So we present this Jesus who's like a hippie and he's a little bit soft. And we hyper focus on the lamb qualities and we kind of like skip over the lion qualities. And so it gives guys this picture of what I call this passive Christian nice guy. And that's what we see in Sunday, most churches. And it's a guy who just goes with the flow. He doesn't really stand up. And that's not really the men in the Bible. That's not the 12 disciples. That's not Jesus. That's not the standard he gives us. So we have this ambition. We need to loose it, but we have this warning about selfish ambition. So we have to check our ambition. Is it just to expand my life and for that purpose only? So it first comes from having the right relationship with the Lord where you're in right standing and he starts to put new desires into your heart. And those are the things that you want to start to see happen. So here, let me pause there. And then I want to say something because you brought up success and I want to make sure we
Yeah.
clarify that too.
Okay.
Did you have a question or you want me just to roll right into the success part?
Um, I do have a question, but let's go into success first.
So success is interesting. Whenever I post on social media and I might put a quote that God wants you to be successful, or I'll use Joshua 1:8 and I'll talk about how the Lord, promised that he would make his way successful. It gets a response. Now I get it. We live in a social media world where you get these little clips, right? So you're not getting my entire theology in a 20-second reel. So we need to give grace to each other and hey, what do they really mean when they say that? But it's funny because there's this gut reaction in a lot of Christians and they're like, you can't be successful, that's worldly success or whatever. And so they take the word success and almost demonize it. But God is a God that empowers us to be successful. He empowered Adam in the garden to be successful. He blesses them, Adam and Eve, and he gives them everything they need to be successful in the sphere of the garden for the work that he called them to do. And then he gives them this awesome mandate to be fruitful to have results in life. That's what that means. To multiply. Everything you touch should be multiplying, to replenish, to refill yourself so you can give out more to others. And we have the picture of fruit, and fruit within itself has seed. And that seed and that fruit has the ability to augment itself and duplicate itself. So this is a picture of success. This is a picture of duplication, multiplication. This is what we see all through Scripture. Jesus is looking for fruit. And he comes to a tree, and if there's no fruit on it, he curses it. So he's expecting a return. I actually say it this way, and it's one of the reasons I wrote the standard. Let me just do this minor cutoff here, is that one day I was, just asking the Lord, like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, sometimes we feel like, hey, I feel like I have some stuff you've given me, but I'm not sure what I should be doing. And I heard the Lord highlight to me very clearly that he expects a return on his investment. And I started thinking about my parents, teachers, pastors, people that have poured into me, my life experiences. And I was starting to feel the conviction of God's put a big deposit in me, and he's done it for all of us, and he expects a return on that. Now you have to decide what that looks like, and you have to discern what that looks like for you. And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to start being diligent to finish this book, and I'm going to write it. And I'm going to start moving in the direction that I feel called. And for me, that's success, right? So success is highly individualized. It's not the world's picture of success. So if it's 2 cars in the driveway, if it's a boat, if it's a bigger house, a second house, again, I don't have a problem with that. But that's not the vision for me. That's not the vision of success. Success is doing everything God called me or called you to do, Corey, and for you reaching your full potential to fulfill the call of God on your life. And he'll bless you along the way. There will be prosperity. There will be suffering. There will be discipline. There will be trials. There will be challenges to form you into the man that's the man that's going to finish well and reach his full potential. And to do that, you need to have drive. You need to be driven. You need to have ambition for the right thing. So I'll cap this off with the Apostle Paul in Philippians chapter 3 talks about he's running a race. And he's like, I'm running a race and I'm pressing towards the prize. Like he's using all these athletic metaphors, a lot of discipline metaphors of I'm pressing and I'm running and I'm pushing and I'm striving that I would receive the upward call, the prize of the upward call, which is not his salvation. He's already saved. He knows he's saved. He's pressing towards this full potential, this prize that he wants to give to Jesus, and it's linked to his inheritance as well. And to me, that's success. And he even says in Philippians 3, he's like, not that I've attained it. So he's saying I'm pushing towards something. I haven't gotten it yet. But at the end of his life, he says, I finally did it. I finished my course. I attained unto the goal. So by the end of his life, he ends up getting this thing, which for him was success.
Yeah. And I feel like that what you said about like the success being what you feel called to as a believer is the distinction that a lot of people need to make, because in American Christianity, we look at success and we look at resources as money, as your job, as what you do, like you said. But it's the resources that we're given are not just monetary. Like the resources are our family, our community, and like how we steward those are probably the bigger impact than how we steward finances. And it's not when you hear like you said, the parable of the talents and like wanting to get a return on investment, that same thing can be said of your children, of your friendships, of your family. Like, how are you pouring into your kids? How are you pouring into your wife or your friends to build each other up, to have a return on investment for the kingdom here on earth and expanding God's kingdom here on earth, to give a return on people who know Christ in that way?
Agree. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, one of the things that I'm the most fulfilled on right now in my life is watching my kids. My daughter just turned 16. She leads worship. I can hear her in her room. She's singing a worship song. I look at her Bible. It's marked up. There's a lot of notes in it. My son is very active in his youth group as well, and he's starting to play some instruments. And just watching the fruit in their lives, like that's success to me. Like
Yeah.
That's more success than, whatever college they get into, whatever. Raising kids that met the goal and that will continue on with the Lord is deeply meaningful to me. And so I think with church, because of the mindsets around money, because of bad doctrine, we've taken the money and the finance part, and some people have demonized it and said, like, hey,
Mhm.
it can't be that. And to be healthy, we need to have a view where all these things fit together in their proper order. I have a friend, he has like probably one of the best definitions of prosperity I've ever seen. And he defines it as, it's enough for me to fulfill the vision God's given me, and enough left over for me, and enough where I can help you fulfill yours. And I'm like, what an amazing
Mhm.
definition. It's not a dollar amount. It's not based on any kind of material thing. It's based on, what do I need to fulfill what I'm called to fulfill? God's a God of abundance. And then can I even help other people fulfill theirs? And for the people that are anti-money, it's like, well, I want to help further the gospel, and it takes money to do that. And some
Yeah.
people have a calling to handle a lot of money. Some people don't. I mean, and let's just round this out. You talked about the American gospel. I mean, what does success look like for a Chinese believer under persecution, right? Starting their house church, distributing Bibles illegally. That's success for them. Growing
Mhm.
other people in Christ. So I don't want to make it all about materialistic stuff. That's something God gives us that we need to live our life, and we're blessed in the environment we're in. But if we make it only about that, we've really missed it. We've really missed it.
Yeah.
That's not going to be eternal in the end. So I don't demonize it, but I also don't glorify it to this huge status for myself.
Yeah. And that's a great distinction to make, that the acknowledgement that we can use our resources to impact the gospel in the world as far as like the worldwide church, but it should not be the goal of what we're doing to make money so that the gospel can be preached. Like there are other things that we can do for that investment, if that makes sense. Like we can go to China, we can use our time, we can pray for these people, and the goal of a believer is not to hoard money so that the gospel can be preached, because the gospel, you can have $20 million in the bank, but if no one ever goes to China to tell these people about Christ, like they're never going to hear it. You can have $20 million worth of Bibles sent to China, but if they never make it into the hands of those believers and no one's ever there to help them on their journey to of faith and to show them what it means to be a believer and to spread the gospel, like the resources are for nothing. You have given money and you feel better about yourself, but you have not fulfilled the call to go and make disciples.
Well, I think we all have individual calls. So the first thing you said is, if you're hoarding anything, that's not biblical or kingdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we see this parable where Jesus talks about some people take money and they just use it to build bigger barns. That's a picture of just hoarding it and sitting on it. So that's not a picture of stewardship. That's a picture of acting like it's your own. And you know what? Some people are called into business, and they're called to, and they're really skilled at it, and they're really good at it, and they generate wealth, and then they give that wealth to the right ministries and to the right people so they can fulfill the call. So I think it's highly individual. So I wouldn't say, hey, I'm not going to tell someone else what the call of God is for them. Because right now there's probably a very wealthy businessman, multiple, that make money, and then they give it to people who have the means to go into China and have the means to do the next part of the journey. So we all have a part to play. And at the end of the day, it's, what is the Lord telling you? Are you being obedient to what he's telling you? Because I'm not supposed to be Corey and you're not supposed to be Josh. So I have to do what I'm called to do. And like I said at the beginning, we're a multi-membered, a many-membered body, and we all play a different part in God's eternal purpose.
Yeah, and I'm glad you clarified that, because I feel like that's the point that I missed in saying that, was if everyone's goal was to make money, that's where the issue would be, instead of acknowledging that there is a need beyond money. And so, what does life look like for you right now? Like, you've got the books and the Kingdom Driven Life and the Standard. So you said that the Standard and the Kingdom Driven Life came from a purpose that you feel God put on your heart. So can you give us the origin story of all that?
Yeah, I'll tell you about the Standard. So you guys already got my background with being in business, being in corporate. Being in leadership, I call it being trained in Egypt, right? Joseph went into Egypt and he got the training just like Moses. He got the best
Mm.
training in the world at the time on how to run government and how to, govern appropriately. And it's kind of like I have a parallel story with the Lord sending me into the modern version of Egypt, where I got trained in the systems of the world in leadership, training, building high performing teams, leadership and development. And so I'm now a little bit later in life. This is in 2016. And I've been in this management leadership capacity. And I'm reading the Gospels one day. And I start journaling a little bit. And I'm seeing something I really never tuned into before. We hear messages our whole life and we're always reading the words of Jesus. But this time, as I was doing my devotion and just reading the Gospels, I was looking through a different lens, Corey. And it's like I was seeing not just what Jesus was saying, which is amazing, but I was seeing what he was doing. And I was looking at his methods and the way he built his team. I was looking at his morning routine. I was looking at his habits. I was looking at the discipline that he had in his life. I'm looking at just all these different lenses that I now have later in life. At this point in 2016, I'm in my 40s and I just have a different lens of the way I'm approaching everything. And so I started journaling. I never said, hey, I'm going to write a book, but I was seeing so many awesome connections and I was categorizing them like, wow, Jesus is a man of discipline. Jesus is a man of diligence. Jesus is a leader. Jesus is organizational. Jesus is a man of prayer. And I'm like, just starting to put this together. And somewhere from 2016 to 2020, probably around 2018-ish, I said, I think this is a book, and now I'm going to flip the switch. I'm going to be diligent, and I'm going to keep writing this with the goal of getting it out there. And so that's how the Standard was born. And the main message of it is that Jesus is man as God intended man to be. He's the standard for masculinity. You're talking to a lot of guys here. So we got all this attack on masculinity. We got all these movements for masculinity, all these different models for masculinity. And this book is establishing that Jesus is the standard for us. And I look at his life in 6 dimensions or 6 sections of the book. It's almost like mini books within one book. And we look at his journey of self-mastery, which is his self-leadership, self-discipline. So there's a whole section on that. These are really short chapters with little coaching sections after. So guys use them as devotionals. You can just go as a reference to whatever you need for that day. We look at leadership, the way he built teams, the way he leads other people. So that one, we also have this cool, I partnered with a friend of mine who's an artist. So every section has a different illustration. So the first one is self-mastery is the measuring reed, that he's the standard. It would have been a standard, like a measuring rod that we're measured by. And the next one, it's a shepherd's staff that he leads us. And then we look at communication, the way he tells stories. And, one of the ways that Jesus communicates is that he never pushes. He always pulls people with his questions. It's a great model for us. It's a model that I've used in the corporate environment. Coaching other people is really asking very good questions to pull them in the direction and to get information about where they are and where they need to go so they can develop critical thinking. It's not just hey, do this, this, and this. So for that, we use the picture of a fishing net, that Jesus pulls the net. You can't push the net, right? So there's that. And then another skill set that every man needs to be aware of, it's something that's been highlighted for over the past 10 years, is this thing called your EQ, your emotional quotient. And your EQ is your ability to establish trust and develop rapport with people, where you can identify and you can be empathetic to where they are. And from there, you can have really genuine relationships and really have trust. And when there's trust, you can build a lot with someone. And Jesus has a very high EQ. So we look at his emotional quotient. And then we get to the section all the guys love, which is confrontation. Jesus is not just this lamb nature that lays down. There's certain people he confronts, and he confronts anyone that's standing in the way of others coming to truth. So he confronts the religious order, he confronts the Pharisees, he confronts anyone. When he flips the tables in the temple, one of the motivations for that is that the tables were blocking the entrance where the poor could get in. So anything that's blocking access to him and his Father, he flips it and he confronts. So we look at what healthy confrontation looks like, and then we end with love. So those are the 6 dimensions within the Standard.
Yeah, I love that. And so when you hit on discipline there, what would you say are with your coaching that you've experienced and with just being in the corporate world and sales and training people up, what are the elements of discipline that most people lack nowadays, and where do most people struggle with discipline?
Let me take this from a Christian perspective first, because like all the guys that I work with in the Standard 59 Mastermind, or anyone that I speak to, or just listens to a podcast or reads a book, they want more discipline. Like it's one of the most common things.
Mm,
Like I need more structure in my life. I need more discipline.
mm,
So when it comes to number one, our relationship with God, it can't be born out of discipline. Okay, so there's a role for discipline, but it can't be the starting place for a relationship with the Lord. So I say it this way: if you make everything about discipline, you end up with a denomination. You end up with something that can be old or
mm,
outdated, and it's not a living, thriving relationship. So it has to be driven by something underneath it that's much more powerful. And for me, that's devotion. So you have to have devotion in your life first. And if you're devoted to something and you understand the goal and the why and you're powered by that, discipline should be a natural outbreak of that. That comes out of the source. So because I'm devoted to the Lord, I have discipline in my prayer life. I have discipline in the way I order my behavior. Because I'm devoted to my wife, you're married as well. So because you're devoted, you honor your commitment, right? You stay within the boundaries of your marriage. It's not like it's this hard thing to do. You got to be so disciplined. It's like, no, I love her and I'm disciplined. So because I love my wife and I honor her, that's where my discipline comes from. So we got to be really careful as men that we don't flip it, because if you flip it and you're being disciplined to try to be devoted, that's the definition of religion, right? So
mm,
that's backwards. So that's the first thing I'll say. Now, the next thing is, after we have devotion and after we're starting, discipline looks like something. So we have to start putting pieces into place. And what's that look like? So one of the first things I start with is, there's this principle in the Bible of firsts. We see this law of first mention. We see this law of like whenever anything is done first, it has a lot of significance to it. And that even correlates to your day. What do you do first? What's the first thing in your day? What's the thing you're giving in your day first place priority? So one of the non-negotiables that I have with all the guys we work with is that we have a time in the morning where we meet with the Lord. And that's our time of devotion. There's a couple things we do within that container, but we see this in the life of Jesus. It says that he went to a certain place to pray. So the certain place means it was a regular place of prayer, right? He traveled around, but there were places that he went that it says that was his habit. He would go there repeatedly. And there's even times where the disciples can't find him, and then they go and look before daybreak, and he's at that place meeting with his Father. So there's something in his life, in his morning routine, about praying first. And even, I was reading this morning actually, when, Jesus worked so many miracles. He was an amazing speaker, awesome messages, right? Great
mm,
responses from the crowd, signs and wonders throughout his entire ministry. And when the disciples come up, and they've been spending time with him, right, and living with him, when they come up, they would have observed his whole lifestyle. When they approach him one day, they say, "Teach us how to pray." Really interesting, Corey. Really interesting. Like, teach us how to pray. They didn't say, "Teach us how to do miracles. Teach us signs and wonders. Teach me how you multiplied the fish and the bread. Teach us how
mm,
you delivered that last point to that message was killer. Like, how'd you when you took the Pharisees on, that was awesome." Right? They're saying, "Teach us how to pray." So they observed something in his lifestyle. And so that was a discipline of prayer. So we talk a lot about discipline, and that discipline will carry over to everything. So, what I've noticed in my life is, and people have probably heard this before, but I believe it's true. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So if I have a disciplined lifestyle, it spills out into other areas of my life. I notice for me that fitness is a big one correlated with my faith. So I don't want to make this too religious, because you don't have to be super fit to have a strong relationship with the Lord. But for me
yeah.
personally, I notice that when I'm disciplined, when I'm delaying gratification, when I have boundaries in my life, it spills over into all these other areas of my life. It spills over into my work. My relationship with the Lord is where it starts. It spills over into, being regimented and disciplined and working out when I feel like it, when I don't, watching my diet. So all those things get better for me. So that's one thing I notice, and that's one thing I would encourage men to do. And that's why I love what you're doing here with the connection between faith and fitness, because there is a connection there. And there's so many athletic metaphors. It's one of the reasons on Instagram I'm at Kingdom Athlete. And the reason I chose that, it's not because I view myself as this awesome athlete naturally. It's because my favorite metaphor in scripture is that of the athlete. And we see the Apostle Paul, I referenced one already in Philippians, but he has all these athletic metaphors that he's delivering to an audience that would have understood what they meant, because it was against the backdrop of the Roman games. So some of those contests, they had to devote themselves to a disciplined lifestyle for 12 months before they can even enter the game. And the Apostle Paul is saying, discipline yourself. When he's talking about this and train like an athlete, you're seeing when he's exhibiting, like, I train my body like an athlete. When I box, I'm not shadow boxing. When I wrestle, and he's presenting this picture of, like, to be a Christian is and should be a disciplined lifestyle that someone can look at and say, wow, you live differently. It looks like something.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I love ending with that, because that is the purpose of, like, the kingdom life is you look different because you're on a different path, because you have a different goal. And like you said, it is the pursuit of the goal. It is not the pursuit of discipline. Discipline comes from what the goal is. And so I was blessed to go to school with, or here at LSUS, with Kendrick Ferris, who is an Olympic weightlifting guy and, like, went to the Beijing Olympics. And one of the things he said stuck with me. And, like, this is, I guess, where the root of discipline for me came from was, and it's a funny story how I got to talk to him one day, but he said that the goal is Beijing Olympics and to get the gold medal. And everything is going to come out of that. And so I'm going to max my PRs because that's the goal. I'm going to win every competition on the way to the Olympics because Beijing is the goal. And I'm going to lift every day because Beijing is the goal. And so in the same way, like, that is what I try to do for my life. I set the goal way out there so that
Awesome.
everything that I do from here on, like, is going to require discipline to get to that goal. And so, like, on Instagram, I'm reading through the Bible 10 times in 10 years.
Awesome.
That means I'm going to have to be disciplined to read the Bible every day to get to read the Bible 10 times in 10 years. And if you want to be on that journey, obviously come and follow Disciplined HQ at or on Instagram. And so, but that idea of, if Jesus is the goal, if being like Christ is the goal, it is going to require the disciplines of Christ to reach that. And so I love that perspective that you laid out.
That's an awesome picture you just painted for us. What an amazing, like, really natural reality where he was focused on everything had to come into alignment with what his goal was. I call that having a GDV. So GDV is a God-driven vision. So that's actually a chapter within the book. Kingdom-driven is, every guy has to have something. There's a corporate purpose, but then there's an individual purpose for our life. And a lot of times, Corey, when guys don't have the discipline that you're talking about, or when they feel like they're lacking meaning in their life, it's because they don't have a vision. So it's really important and critical that you have a vision that God gave you, that you're partnering with and you're running after. So it's so important, man. That was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. Glory to God for sure. And so how can people get in touch with you now? Like, if they're resonating with the living a disciplined life, if they want to reach that next level and they feel like they need help or coaching of some kind, obviously, like, again, can you share the books and where to find them and then how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, really easy. The best way to find everything. The books are on Amazon. There's different places where you can find them and connect. I'm on social media on all the meta platforms at Kingdom Athlete. The hub is standard59.com, standard 59, just the numbers 5 and 9.com. That'll bring you to everything that I have. But I do have a gift for anyone that listened and made it this far. So the new book, Kingdom Driven, I want to give it to you for free. So if you're listening to this and you want it, I want to send you the PDF for free. The best way to get that would just go to kingdomdrivenbook.com and just put your email in, tell me where to send it, and we'll get this out to you immediately. So that's my gift to your audience.
I love it. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Corey. It's an honor, man. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep running the race and keep fighting the fight, bro.
Will do. All right. Talk to you next time.